CJ Thomas, and I'm from Eve Radio. I'm joined today by
Wacktopia,
Cinnamon Chow,
Kane Rizzle.
And what I'd like to talk to you guys about is the general state of the game. How do you guys find Eve these days?
I think it's pretty action-packed. There's a lot going on. Possibly a slight decline recently because of the Alliance tournament. A lot of key content creators probably were quite busy with that. But I think it's in a pretty good space. There's quite a lot of player events going on, and dev organised ones as well.
Played ship balancing. It's been really good. There's a lot of ships that were sort of very underused that now using. A couple of years ago you get laughed at flying an Eagle in PvP. Didn't see many Ishtar's, so it's nice to see things getting shaken up. And
the
still a fun game to play.
It's very different.
Yeah, that's the thing. The game has been changed a hell of a lot since 2006 when I started playing. Specifically with the ship balancing, making more ships PvP capable. So like I said, we start seeing people flying navitas and probes in combat instead of just using them for their designated purpose. It starts to make the game a lot broader than it used to be, because it just used to be certain ships would be used in certain situations.
How do you guys feel about the move towards like the loggy frigates? There were a lot of loggy frigates in the AT, and it was good to see them, I thought anyway. What did you guys think about that?
I think specifically in the Alliance tournament, I probably got the most experience because I was actually a captain for one of the teams.
Right.
We got fourth, by the way. I think they're a really good addition. Before they were underutilized. But this year, I think particularly Shadow Cartel really demonstrated they're just really handy, really cheap, really fast, really agile, and in some ways they're more resilient than a traditional logistics ship, and they still rep a lot, and you can save quite a lot of points in the Alliance tournaments. You can get bigger ships, more DPS, more control than typical comps.
They actually work really well as well, don't they?
Yeah, they're really
great for new players as well.
Yeah.
It used to be the case you'd have to get
skill
up to a Tech 2 Guardian.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're great in certain aspects. Like I said, the Alliance tournament, they're amazing. They really are a key because of the low points and the like. When you actually get into what we call real world or real Eve PvP, it's a different ball game. They've worked in certain T3 fleets and the like, but when you actually scale up from having a 10 to 15 man engagement or 20 man engagement like in the tournament to larger engagements, they get picked off too quickly. The counters to them
Numerous.
are a lot more numerous, whereas you've got an enclosed system in the Alliance tournament, which is, like I said, what it's designed for. I think for noobs playing with them in small frigate fleets, I've seen people try it. The guys from
It's not easy.
It's not
easy, yeah.
And you have to really pay attention to it. And once one or two goes, specifically I've seen them in faction warfare in groups there, but it's easy enough to pick them off and to break those chains because the locking with the frigates is a lot quicker. So when you're engaging with smaller ships, you can change your targets a lot quicker. You don't have to have stuff pre-locked, so people know more or less, well, they've locked all the frigates up, and so they're going to try and target, so keep up. So you just lock, fire, and change your targets that way.
I think it's quite cool that it has like a now transition. Like you said, in small gang situations they can be quite powerful, and then you tend to go towards Tech 1 cruisers, and then you go straight to Tech 2 logistics or carriers, triage carriers. I think before in the past it was either Tech 2 logistics or triage, and there's no in between.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the fact now is that your Tech 1 logistics is actually a lot more powerful than T2 logistics, because your requirement for entry is a lot lower, so you can get a lot more younger players involved flying these. Logistics is an incredibly challenging aspect of the game.
Yeah, it's one of the things that's put me off flying logistics, is having a lot of people turn around and said, "Do you have logistics 5? No. Go away.
Well,
come back."
That is, I mean, it's a great, if you're flying Guardians and Basilisks, the T2 logistics or level 5 logistics is key, because it makes it so much stronger.
Yeah, makes it work practically.
It makes it work. Your cap transfer is important. But when you're flying the Tech 1 equivalents or the Scimitar, you don't necessarily need that. I think the more important skill for logistics pilots is good cap skills and good navigation skills, so that your afterburner's not chewing all your cap and the like. but the level of entry is a great thing. You know, changing the Tech 1 logistics, making them more powerful. It gets a lot more players interested who aren't necessarily want to be right in the middle of the fight.
Yeah.
You know, I can still hang back a bit and still
contribute.
contribute. That's the important thing.
So where do you guys see Eve going in the future?
In what regard? Sorry, in terms
so
of
like we've got an old game. It's 10 years old. They're looking at maybe moving it on with the times. Where do you see it going and changing?
I think polishing up what's there currently would probably. I mean, they're doing it anyway. The ship rebalance is almost redone, at least the first initial pass. But you're already seeing hints of further rebalancing. I think there's a proposal for interceptors and interdictors to be rebalanced in Hyperion or the next expansion. Oceanus, yeah. And we haven't seen the details of that, but it's quite interesting they're now doing repetitive because they got rebalanced maybe 6 months ago, 7 months ago. So that's quite quick turnover. So I think as long as that keeps going, players will generate enough content by themselves. As long as you give them some incentive, some new thing to latch onto. Because I mean nowadays you see dicta fleets, just pure interdictors, maybe a couple of logistics rigs like you mentioned. And I mean, you would never see that in the past. I mean, when would you ever see like a heretic fleet, just pure heretics?
Well, that's the thing. Heretics. You know, seeing heretics as being used as interdictors.
Yeah.
I mean, going back 2006, 2007, it was the Saber.
Yeah,
and nothing
that
else.
was it. Yeah.
You know, that was the only interdictor used. So you're seeing, you know, even the Kaldari interdictors are being used a lot more because you can fit them. There's a lot more utility in all the ships. It's not there's no I win button. There are different ways of fitting ships, but the sheer variety is kind of what I think is driving Eve forward. It's not as stagnant as it was a fair few years ago, where it was, you know, unless you flew a Dramiel, you weren't competitive in PvP unless you had, you know, you were flying the exact counter to it and using links. Which, you know, used to annoy a lot of people, but it was the only way to catch a Dramiel that didn't want to be caught. And you know, the risk-free PvP is no longer there. It's a lot more challenging to catch people. But I think the biggest challenge for the game itself would be the coding for CCP. It's, you know, they mentioned it earlier from the CSM. There's a lot of old coding that needs to be revised, and they keep on saying they've lost a lot of the talent at CCP as the company. I mean, you know, 11 years just on one game. It is a long time, but and they say it's going to be difficult to recode because they've lost that. But I think that's the opportunity to actually have a look at the code properly then, you know, and maybe redesign certain parts of the code, take it out. You know, if it's like with POS, you know, player-owned structures in nullsec is one of the big issues for nullsec, and the way, you know, that works. Redesign it, take it out for a few months. You know, say, well, look, we're going to take it out. This is how sovereignty will work until this point, but it's going to take something from CCP to make that decision, and to keep, you know, all the players in the game. I mean, it's easy enough to draw new players in whenever there's a massive event like, you know, 70 odd capital ships dying in one system, you know, 10,000 players involved. People are interested in that, and you'll always get them in. But it is that player retention that is so important, to keep players like myself coming back year after year, and, you know, banging our heads against the wall when we lose our favorite ship, and to rebalancing. You know, they rebalanced the Rifter again, which made it a little bit more competitive, but it's not the same.
Yeah. That's gonna be interesting where they go with they talk about the Forever video. I don't know how much that they'll carry through, but the sort of Starbase expansion, the sort of pioneer aspect, and I think the poses, people keep saying this, they make a large part of that, and even if they could just do something like to make the SMA experience better would be really interesting, I think, because it still puts me off being in wormhole space. The fact that I just dump all my ships in this SMA and label them and remember which ones are mine.
It's not intuitive. It's not.
Yeah, but it totally needs to be redesigned.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and I think it's not a case of reviewing current code. It's pretty much, let's just rip it out and start from scratch.
Agree with that.
You know, how can we make this work efficiently? Whether it's a case of saying, well, look, terribly sorry guys, we've been testing this. To implement it's going to take us a few weeks. But then Eve and CCP do have the test servers where all this stuff can be implemented. So on a test server, you just rip out all the pods. Right, this is the new code we're putting in. Let's test it and see how it goes. That's again something that has driven, I think, has made the game last, is having the test server and getting players involved. You know, the CSM involved, having player feedback. Fozzie's always on the test server.
Yeah. Whenever
there's testing going on for the Alliance tournament or the player tournaments, the player organised tournaments. They are interested in having players in CCP like Fozzie, Kill 2. These guys care about the game, and that helps it drive it forward for the rest of us.
So the other question I was going to ask you was, what keeps you guys involved, and how long have you been playing? Start with you.
I've been playing on and off for about 7 years, and with various groups of people, and for me, like, it's still probably one of the only games out there, if not the only game out there, where just that sense of community and the meta game, the relationships you have with people, and the challenge, the fact that there's never an easy answer, things do keep changing, they keep shaking it up, and the fact that, when I have a stint at playing at it, that I always feel that big challenge, and I feel like I'm getting better, and I feel that actually, just personally, it makes you set really good challenges for yourself, and I've never played another game like it that gives you that challenge, and I keep coming back to those games I've played and left, but I think EVE's the only game I've ever played that I've stayed with for this length of time, for that reason.
I think for me personally, I've only been in 3 corps really, practically only one of them was a transition corps. I've been playing since 2007 or something, somewhere in that region, that ballpark, maybe 5 years or so, 5-6 years, and it's been pretty much the challenge, because it's all player driven, that the PvE aspects I don't focus on, I focus on the PvP. It's all dynamic, every fight isn't quite the same, you can do some slight changes, you can play around, see what it does, and I mean, the big thing to me, in my mind, is EVE is the only game I know where you can go 1 versus 20, 1 versus 30, 1 versus 40, 1 versus 50, and still come out ahead. Like, one of my favourite fights was, I was roaming in no-sec in a hurricane late at night, and the only people that were on was a Russian 50-man fleet bashing a POS, a player-owned station with, I think, 2 super carriers, a Titan, a bunch of carriers, I think 50-man fleet, logistics, vagabonds, all this. And I just walked in and killed 2 of them, walked out again. And it was just, I mean, there's no other game really, we can go 1 versus 50, there's no, in WoW it's not possible at all. And it's just that challenge where you can drive yourself. And the other big thing actually is the Alliance tournament. I think player-owned tournaments are really good for the high-end PvP, the very high-end. Like, a lot of guys sort of get disenfranchised with it in day-to-day PvP. It can be great because it can have really good highs, like I mentioned. It can also have really big lowers where you feel every day you get blobbed or whatever. And the Alliance tournaments are where you can sort of even the scales and sort of show the best of you against the best of the best of the best, and show, on a levelish playing field, and show your individual talent or your team's talent. I mean, this year was the first year my team played in the Alliance tournament, and a lot of the guys were sort of playing roughly as long as Kane, or possibly even longer, and they were sort of, they wouldn't play for a year or something, come back, and then they'll get disenfranchised again. But a lot of the Alliance tournament really brought them together. I think it's a really good, the Syndicate Competitive League, if that still goes on, the Neo is a similar thing, where they suddenly played the game, went to weekly practices, and I think one of them mentioned that he would pay a subscription, he would pay just for EVE if you could log on 4 times a week, or I think 3 times a week, and just have guaranteed 2 or 3 hours of close-knit fights, sweat off your brow sort of thing, where everything makes a difference. And there's no audience, it was just internal it was internal with another team, but it was, for those 2-3 hours he could just play at the very best he was capable of, and it was really driving him. I think for a lot of PvP focused players, the Alliance tournament and the like are really what keeps them in the game. I know there's a lot of teams who only subscribe, like Hydra Reloaded, I don't know if they'll keep doing it, but they only subscribe to the Alliance tournament pretty much. The rest of the year they just plan around it, playing around tournaments. I think that's really important for the high end PvPers, probably.
I mean, for myself, I've been playing since 2006, and since I've been solo pirate since 2007. I've pretty much done my own thing. The community has always been brilliant. I've made friends in the game just by shooting them, pretty much.
How does that work? You coming along, you're shooting at me. I'm not really going to like you.
It's the manner in which you do it. It's the banter afterwards. If someone, that was good, that was a good fight. You start talking. You start talking, you see them in local again, hey, how you doing? I'm going to try and catch you today.
Yeah.
Along those lines, a lot of the older players like Flash Fresh, he was
CEO of the Bastards,
CEO of the Bastards. He was an independent in the area I was in, and you just get to know the players, and then there was a big corp of local players that I would shoot at constantly, and eventually you start talking to some of their guys. Eventually the guys go, look, I won't shoot you. The rest of the corp might. Eventually you start talking to the rest of them, and it is the community. But for what's kept me playing is the rush.
Yeah.
There is no other game that offers PvP where, still to this day, I get the shakes. It's like I'd create a new character and just do some dueling in high sec, and you'd be killing players who've been playing for 4 years, but you can still compete with a low skilled pilot, because there is a certain amount of real life skill that you need. You can, and it can be learnt.
So I shouldn't feel necessarily intimidated by you being a newer character myself. I've only been playing for a year and a half.
Once you're about a year in, it's a completely level playing field.
Yeah, it is completely level.
Even
because
before then.
Yeah, I mean, with your frigate skills, it's like within a year you can pretty much max out frigate skills in a specific frigate, and you can be competitive with that frigate. So basically, fighting me in exactly the same frigate, you have the same skills as at a year as my character with 150 million SP. There's no advantage there, and the thing was, implants and links and all this kind of stuff do make a difference in if your play style is, towards that. A lot of people used to give me grief because I used to use links in the 210 system, but I was using those links because I'm a pirate. I want to make money off a kill. I'm trying to, every advantage I have so that I don't lose my ship, but I can catch you. And I made a very successful career out of it, in game, of course. Very, very big
That'd
deal.
be very successful if you.
Yeah, very, very big deal in internet spaceships. But
internet spaceships are serious business.
if I could make money in real life like I did in Eve, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. To be honest, I'd be
I'd
be on a yacht somewhere. Yeah.
You'd have a run in with a real life Concorde if you were making it.
Yeah, well, there is that. But again, it's the freedom in the game, I think, has been phenomenal. I mean, being able to suicide gank in high sec, using a -10 character, which we, when Hulkageddon, player-driven content, the freedom to do whatever you want, be a solo player, be in a massive corporation, go to null sec, mine in high sec, in relative safety.
Yeah.
And as I say, it's the relative safety aspect, but there's always that edge.
You're never truly safe in New Eden.
You're never truly safe. I mean, this is the thing. When they were talking about walking in stations, and my thing is, fine, as long as I can mug someone in the station. If I could do that, then I'm all for it. Because allow me the freedom in the game, which is what CCP have given us. And there's always certain restrictions. There's always certain people who come into the game and say, suicide ganking needs to be changed, and this needs to be changed, and this needs to be changed. But those aren't the players who are going to hang around for a long time. It's like I say, Helicity, with the Hulkageddon, was a massive thing. And a lot changed. CCP had to change the game. With suicide ganking, but it's still possible.
Still feasible.
Yeah, it's a lot more difficult, but it's still possible. CCP haven't taken that away. They say, well, we're going to change
raise the bar. Raise the bar, basically.
There it is. Here's the challenge. Can you? And players always rise to a challenge when there's ship balancing. It's people go, you're destroying my ship.
One of the most fascinating things that I see is that they change something, they rebalance it, and people are like, well, what can I now do with my fits to make it
do the same,
better or the
same?
same? And it's just so fascinating to see all the different changes made.
I mean, it's like many years ago. I mean, because of Falcon, we're talking about the charity. Everyone has a Falcon story. When I guess the German mercenary group used to run around with as many Falcons as they had regular ships. So if they had a 40-man fleet, there were 20 Falcons. And they were absolute game changers, the Falcons. And then they got rebalanced. And the next thing you start seeing rooks flying around, because now the rook is actually the new Falcon. But it's a lot easier to deal with the rook. Or
anticipate it.
Yeah, anticipate it. Whereas unless you actually knew systems. or new corps and alliances, you know, you didn't really know, but I mean, you could pretty much guarantee that there's going to be a Falcon along the line. So it was like anti-Falcon groups. In the group that was running around in my area of space, you know, we'd have a couple of guys. Well, we're going to engage these guys. Who's going to go after the Falcons? And, you know, you'd have a few guys just set up in
prepped and ready
to go. Just as soon as the Falcon decloaks, someone would make a beeline for them, just to chase them off the field, to level the playing field, so to speak. Like Sulu was saying, you know, going in outnumbered and undergunned, and still coming out
not ahead in some way.
Where there's like, well, I killed 2 of their ships. Yes, I lost my battle cruiser, but I killed 2 of their ships, and there was 50 of them. You know, it took 50 of them to kill me.
Yeah.
You know, and again, that rush after something like that is what makes the game for me.